In the 1970s, when America was experimenting with wild car designs and home garages smelled like gasoline and fiberglass, a small company from Michigan created something strange and unforgettable. The car looked like a Ferrari, sounded like a muscle car, and could be built by someone with enough tools and ambition. This was the Kelmark GT, a kit car born from a mix of dreams, engines, and maybe a little madness. But behind the fiberglass panels and engine swaps is a story that starts with two men and an idea that almost outran the laws of physics and maybe common sense. The Kelmark GT was created by Jim Kellison and Randy Markham in 1969. Their company, Kelmark, was based in Okemos, Michigan. The name came from combining their last names, Kellison and Markham. Their original idea was to help people put big engines into small cars, especially the Volkswagen Beetle and the Chevrolet Corvair. One of their earliest creations was the Kelmark Sleeper, a Beetle that looked normal on the outside but had a surprise V8 engine stuffed inside. In 1974, they launched the first Kelmark GT, sometimes called the Kelmark 1 GT. It had a fiberglass body and was inspired by the Ferrari Dino 206 and 246. It was meant to be built on a Corvair or mid-engine V8 setup. Later that same year, they introduced the Kelmark 2 GT, which was made to fit on a regular Volkswagen Beetle floor pan. To make it work, they widened the body by about 5 inches. The windshield came from a Ford Pinto, and the side windows were flipped versions of Chevrolet Caprice or Impala glass. This gave the car a mix of parts that probably confused junkyard owners everywhere. Over the years, Kelmark offered several versions. The Kelmark GT Independence was made to fit Volkswagen and Porsche Type 4 engines. The Kelmark GTS came with a silver finish and sometimes had a Buick 231 cubic inch V6 engine. The Kelmark GT Chairman was the luxury version, with leather seats, air conditioning, and a stereo. Most Chairman models used a Buick V6 engine, but handling was tricky because all the weight was in the back. Then came the wildest one, the Kelmark Toronado GT. This car was built on a custom tube frame and used a huge Oldsmobile Toronado engine, either 425 or 455 cubic inches, with a THM 425 transmission. One version of this car had a 700 horsepower ZL1 big block engine and reached a top speed of 202.7 miles per hour in 1977. That made it the fastest documented street-legal car at the time. Some people say that car went faster than the Ferraris and Lamborghinis of its day, but it did it while possibly shaking the bolts off. The Kelmark Liberator was another custom frame version, designed for all kinds of engine setups, from Volkswagen to big V8. Around 200 of these were made. Production for most Kelmark models continued into the 1980s, with the last cars reportedly built in Holt, Michigan. Despite its strange mix of parts and models, the Kelmark GT built a small but loyal fan base. Some owners built their cars with their families, while others restored them over decades. Teenagers like Kerry Griffin even brought old ones back to life. Enthusiasts like Raymond Tartaglia raced his Kelmark in autocross and praised how it handled, at least when it was not trying to kill him in corners. Though only a few hundred to about 1,200 cars were ever made, the Kelmark GT still pops up at shows, in garages, and on forums. Owners swap stories, fix old fiberglass cracks, and still argue about whether it was better than the Bradley GT. Either way, it is a reminder that once upon a time, with enough fiberglass and a Pinto windshield, you could build your own dream car in your driveway. Back in the late 1970s, a small group of Australians built a car that most people have never heard of. It looked strange. It sounded odd, and it didn't come from a big car factory. It came from a workshop in Melbourne, led by a man named Campbell Bolwell. The car was called the Bwell Ikara. This was not a car made to sit in showrooms under bright lights. It was a car made for people who liked to build, drive, and tinker. But the story behind it? That is where things really start to get interesting. The Bolwell Ikara, also known as the Mark 9, was first shown to the public in November of 1979 at Calder Park Raceway in Melbourne, Australia. The man behind it, Campbell Bolwell, had already made several models like the Mark 7, Mark 8, and the famous Nagari, which used a V8 engine and sold over 100 units. But after that, instead of making another powerful V8 sports car, Bolwell decided to go small, light, and unusual. The Ikara was born as a kit car, meaning it was sold in parts and had to be built by the owner. It was not made for luxury. It was built with one idea in mind: fun to drive without adding extras. The slogan was, "Function before fashion." Only 12 Bolwell Ikara kits were ever produced between 1979 and 1980. Each one had a space frame chassis made from steel tubes and a fiberglass body. The fiberglass panels were made with techniques like chopper gun spraying and hand lamination. It did not have doors. You had to climb in through the roof. That alone was enough to confuse people and possibly scare a few away. Underneath the fiberglass shell, the Ikara used parts from other cars. The front suspension and steering came from the Holden Gemini. That included unequal length wishbones and disc brakes. The rear end was from a front-wheel drive Volkswagen Golf, flipped and placed behind the seats. It had a 1.6-litre engine, also from the Volkswagen Golf, which made 74 horsepower and 119 pound-feet of torque. It was mid-mounted, with the transmission right behind it. That setup gave the Ikara a top speed of around 101 miles per hour. It was not very fast, but it weighed only 1,377 pounds. It had good balance and handled well. The wheelbase was 92 inches, the length 145 inches, and the height just over 43 inches. It came with Simmons 13-inch alloy wheels. The front tires were 185/60ths R13, and the rear ones were 225/60ths R13. It had a fuel tank that held about 10.5 gallons. Fuel economy was close to 26.8 miles per gallon. Owners could buy the Ikara in different kit stages. Stage 1 started at 4,890 Australian dollars. Stage 4 cost about 9,490. Most people needed around 150 hours to build the car themselves. Bolwell even allowed buyers to use different engines, like ones from Renault 5, Honda, or Mazda 323. In 1985, the tooling and molds were sold to a Greek company. The jigs and equipment were shipped overseas. No more Ikaras were made after that. Today, about 11 of the 12 cars are still known to exist. One prototype still lives in Australia, standing as a reminder of a time when climbing into a car through the roof did not seem like such a crazy idea. In the early 1970s, something unusual rolled out of the Otosan factory in Istanbul, Turkey. It had long lines, a fiberglass body, a growl under the hood, and a name that sounded like a secret agent, Anodol STC-16. At first glance, it did not look like something that came from a country more famous for tea than turbochargers. But the Anodol STC-16 was real, and it was loud. It was Turkey's very first sports car, and its story is full of strange decisions, big ambitions, and fiberglass dreams. This is the story of the STC-16, the car they called the Super Turkish Monster. The Anadol STC-16 was built by Otosan, a company under Koç Holding. Otosan was working with Ford at the time, and they had experience building cars like the Anadol A1 and A2. But in 1972, they wanted to try something new. They wanted a sports car. They gave the job to Eralp Noyan, a young Turkish designer who studied at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Belgium. He came up with a bold idea: a 3-door sports coupe with a hatchback rear, long hood, and sharp lines. It looked a little like a Datsun 240Z and maybe a little like a European Capri, but it was very much its own machine. The STC stood for Sport Turkish Car, and 16 came from its 1.6-litre engine. The official meaning later changed to Sport Touring Coupe, which sounded fancier but was the same car. Under the hood was a Ford Kent Crossflow engine from the Ford Mexico. It had 1.6 litres, made about 82 horsepower, and pushed around 116 pound-feet of torque. The engine was paired with a 4-speed manual gearbox, also from Ford. With a top speed of about 100 miles per hour and a weight of 2,028 pounds, it was not going to win a drag race, but it could handle corners and look good doing it. The car had a shortened Anadol chassis and a fiberglass body, which made it lighter but also expensive to fix. The suspension was simple, independent at the front and a live axle at the rear. It was not a high-tech race car, but it worked. Rally drivers like Renk Kochebe, Demir Buki, and Romolo Marcopoli took the STC-16 to victory in several local races. Some tuned versions even made around 140 horsepower. For a country new to sports cars, this was impressive. But the timing was not great. In 1973, the oil crisis hit. Gas prices rose, and fiberglass became expensive. The STC-16 cost over 70,000 Turkish lira, which made it a rich man's toy. Only 176 were ever built between 1973 and 1975. There were also 3 prototypes made in 1972. That was it. No more were made, and the project ended quietly. Some people say production lasted until 1977, but the numbers did not grow. Today, the STC-16 is rare. A few are kept in good condition by collectors. Some still race in classic car rallies. It was not a global success, but it was bold. It was different. It was Turkey's first shot at a sports car, and even though it had no turbo, no huge horsepower, and no fancy badges, it had heart. It had Eralp Noyen's design, the Ford Kent engine, the smell of fiberglass, and a nickname that still sticks, Super Turkish Monster, and that is something no one else can claim. In the 1970s, a strange and powerful car started showing up on American roads. It looked like it had escaped from a racetrack and gotten lost on the freeway. Low to the ground, sharp in design, and loud in personality, this car was not built in a big factory like a Ford or a Chevrolet. It came from a small company in California and was often built in people's garages. The car was called the Manta Mirage, and behind its odd name was a long story of creativity, risk, and a little bit of grease. The Manta Mirage was created by 2 brothers, Brad Levet and Tim Levet, who ran a small company called Manta Cars. Their company was based in Costa Mesa and later Santa Ana, both in Southern California. The Mirage was first introduced in 1974. It was inspired by Can-Am race cars, which were known for their powerful engines and extreme designs. One of those Can-Am cars, the McLaren M6, had a big influence on the look of the Manta Mirage. Unlike most cars at the time, the Mirage did not come off a factory line. Buyers could either get it fully built or they could buy it as a kit and build it themselves. That meant installing the engine, suspension, wiring, and interior. For people who liked turning wrenches more than turning steering wheels, it was a dream project. For others, it was a nightmare they chose willingly. The Mirage had a tubular steel space-frame chassis. In the middle of the car, it could fit a Chevrolet 327, 350, or even a larger 454 engine. Some brave people stuffed in a Ford 460. These were all V8 engines, and many were built to make over 400 horsepower. That might not sound like a lot today, but the Mirage only weighed about 1,900 to 2,000 pounds. With that power-to-weight ratio, it could take off like a bottle rocket strapped to a skateboard. The transmission was often taken from a Chevrolet Corvair, mounted in the rear like in the original car. Some builders used a Volkswagen Beetle front end to keep things simple. It had 4-wheel disc brakes, independent suspension, and a 4-speed manual gearbox. The steering was rack and pinion, so the driving experience was sharp, if not always comfortable. This was not a car with cup holders or smooth leather seats, but it had pop-up headlights, wild doors that opened up and out, and Stewart Warner gauges to watch your engine temperatures and oil pressure climb as you flew down the road. Only around 750 to 1,000 Manta Mirages were built between 1974 and 1986. They even showed up in movies, including the original Gone in 60 Seconds in 1974. It never became a common car, but that was never the goal. It was built by people who did not mind getting their hands dirty and who maybe liked scaring their neighbors a little. Today, some of these cars sell for over $250,000 at auctions. Others sit in garages, still halfway built, waiting for someone to pick up the tools and finish the dream.